All right, all right. So, welcome to the Big Green um, Real Estate Talk. I just wanted to get you guys out there. Those of you who've been listening, you'll probably see me on Facebook right now live. Just to give you guys a heads up, it'll probably flip flop in the camera. That's just the way Zoom does it. Nonetheless, we're excited to bring you guys some information. Those who are out there listening in to this on the power of the internet out here, basically with Facebook and all the great things that maybe you can't find somewhere else. So, just to kind of give you the topic, if you guys haven't seen the topic of the day, it's how to dominate real estate and without a real estate agent, right? So I know that sounds very funny, and I just want to kind of before I really jump into that topic, those of you who don't know, my name is Tyler, and then this is
Chad.Bradshaw over here in San Antonio, Texas, representing the Southern Texas region.
yeah, and I'm over here in Southwest Florida. Both of us actually are EXP realtors, so it's kind of a weird topic to say that how to do, how to dominate real estate without a real estate agent, right? But we're the ones doing it, and we're going to go into this. And I really think it's an important subject because there's a lot of stuff that you could be doing. Um, One of the things is, and Chad, like I said, if you can think of anything else, and oh, by the way, while I'm at it, I just reminded myself that I do have the hashtag out there if you want to use it. It's BG hashtag BGRET. That's Big Green Real Estate Talk. So if you guys want to use that hashtag, you might even see us out there on some of the stuff that we're doing. Um, Nonetheless, I wanted Chad and I to kind of jump into this. One of the things is that I noticed that every buyer that comes our way, they always go on Zillow, right? And there's so many places to really search for there's so many places for a buyer to really search for content of houses and things like that, and really get a feel for what they think is out there. But I've seen them come through and they're talking about Zillow. Chad, what are some of the things that you've came across with buyers actually coming to Zillow essentially in your market, and then you're getting a phone call from them and say, "Well, I seen this on Zillow, but unfortunately, do you ever have that opportunity where you have to explain to them that maybe that property already went pending, but yet it's not pending on Zillow?"
Yeah, that's a good question. Check Telegram. One thing that I wanted to mention was basically Zillow is a hit or miss when it comes to the information. Um, because I've had a few conversations with buyers that will tell me they want me to show them a house, and what happens is they they can't end up seeing the house because it's under contract already,
Mm.
uh, and then they get surprised because I have to explain to them that Zillow doesn't update the information in a timely fashion, and they kind of get frustrated, to be honest with you, especially right now in this pandemic. And by the way, this recording's happening during the pandemic in case you watch it later. uh, the pandemic has caused a lot of buyers to get frustrated with the process because they find a home on Zillow, they get all excited, or realtor.com or Trulia, and then they call me and say, "Hey, Chad, I want to go look at it," and I go look it up on the MLS. Next thing I know, I have to kind of calm them down. I'm like, "Hey, I know you really wanted to see this one, but man, it's already off." So, that's kind of the situation that we've come across, over here.
Yeah, so that's kind of that's very very similar with what I've ran into. I know that a lot of people they have they have this mentality of actually want to go and search on Zillow and some of the other pages, but the problem is that that's not always the best scenario or best situation for them to really get the most out of it in that situation. um I'm check the feed real quick just to make sure. I'm just checking out who's out there into the right now
Okay.
making
Yeah, I
comments.
see.
I didn't know if you had questions on your end. I see a couple things coming in on my end, so that's why I was asking. Um,
And yeah, by the way, those who are watching live, if you have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat, right? That's kind of the point here. We want to have an engaging conversation with you all. Now, this is our first time. I'm sure we'll have, you know, some bumps in the road we have to get through. Bear with us. We appreciate your patience. Nonetheless,
yeah. Go ahead, Chad. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, no, go ahead, man. I think you were
Oh,
talking about some other things here.
yeah. So no worries. So yeah, like Chad said, we're definitely going to get through this. This is our first one, which we're really excited about, by the way. Not to get off topic, but we are really excited about it. So let me go back to that real quick. Let me just reel this back around to what we were talking about in regards to Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, and all these websites that are out there by these what we call third parties, right? These third parties get our information from the MLS, and they have to. It's actually like an update almost that they have to do. And so now, because of that, it takes a while for them to actually update, right? So by that happening, you're not getting the information firsthand, right? You're getting it third hand. So here's a little tidbit. So the whole segment is basically how to dominate real estate without a real estate agent. So a lot of times, if you want up to date information, you got agents who are sending you based on your criteria, right? And they have stuff coming to your email. Okay. And those are up to date. They either get listed right away and you get it in your inbox. They have all kinds of different options, right? But here's what a big suggestion. I'm sure that Chad has one just as much as I have one for my area. You go to triplet.properties, for example. Triplet.properties is my website that is actually linked directly to the MLS. You're going to have up-to-date information on there. Okay. Now, what happens is you'll be able to go on there and you don't have to worry about essentially having to see if something's pending or anything else for that matter, like missing out on the deal because maybe you didn't set yourself up or you set yourself up on some kind of mail list or email list for the Zillow or Realtor.com. And by the time you get it, it's already pending. Now with us, you can get it to your email. Now, if you're right there on top of your email, you got a really good chance. You can also do different things of setting stuff up on text as well. Now, that could get annoying because there's probably tons of properties, but it is an option depending on how eager you are to get a property on that. And I'm sure you guys, you have something similar like that too, right, Chad?
Yeah, Limitless Realty Group is my MLS page that you can go in San Antonio area, and you can find live updates to the market here based off the price point that you're looking for, based off the number of bedrooms, if you want a big backyard, if you need room for entertaining, 2-story, 1-story. You can filter through just like you can on those other bigger websites, the big box websites as I call them.
Yeah, and that's kind of where that's the whole thing with when it comes to these different platforms, if you will. It's just better to get it from directly from a source that's going to be reliable, right? And that's kind of the story. Now, if you're looking at different markets and stuff, like I said, whatever market you're in, that's kind of what website with what realtor's website you want to find and go to because they are intertwined directly with the MLS and you don't have to worry about the update factor. So that's something I always tell people. Like I said, it's just a better way of really getting a hold of a good deal or whatever the case may be. Now, when you do get a hold of these deals, right, these are things that happen. And you got to remember agents like myself and like Chad, we know the negotiation factor is a huge part of the transaction. You got to know what part of that is going to be there and what you're going to be able to do. Okay. So the question becomes for you is what is it that you want to negotiate? Do you know what to negotiate? Do you know the details of the negotiation? Um, so with that being said, it's all dependent upon what you know how to negotiate. So Chad, just, I mean, I know a couple things for myself that I have had to do negotiation wise. What are some of the things that you've kind of came across in your market that maybe you tried to negotiate a little bit on? Um, just to kind of give them a tidbit, and I can kind of go into mine as well.
Some of the things I have to negotiate are depending on the repairs that might need to be completed by the seller. Sometimes I have to help my buyers and figure out what is going to be worth negotiating in terms of I guess as real life examples. The last one I had, the handrails to the entry door of the house needed to be re-secured. Now the home was only 4 years old, but you know, you got to talk about people using that handrail. They wanted that fixed, and then there was some dirt that needed to be added to the foundation around the back. So you want to make sure that stuff's covered by your seller, whoever's selling the house. They need to cover some of those expenses, and that's part of the negotiating strategy. On top of the price of the home, you got to worry about what else might you find after you get into that, the purchase of the house, into the transaction, as we call it on our side. Once you start in the process of purchasing the house, what else is going to come up? You know, it could even be the roof. I've had to negotiate, to help my buyer say, hey, you know, this flashing on the edge of the roof needs to be repaired. The shingles need to be replaced. This one's popping up over there. Now, this is part of the conversation that you have, of course, as you walk, in through the home. The initial time, I always look out for my buyers. I do what I call a pre-inspection with my buyers when I walk with the house. Even the first time, if I know that they like it, I'll walk around and look for anything that might come up during the inspection, just so that I know, what are my comps going to pull for this house, right? You have to look at what the other values are in the area, make sure they're not overpricing people. Sometimes like to overprice their house, and you got to be careful with that. You have to educate yourself with what is out there on the market.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much in every market when it comes to going that route. Like, you really have to educate what's out there. But at the same time, one thing that I'll say in regards to that is that, you as somebody that doesn't have an agent, and this is kind of where we're talking about, but again, this is about dominating this real estate market without an agent, right? And I'm just going to tell you that there's so many facets of a contract to negotiate during the time. I mean, sometimes it's an inspection period just within the contract itself, right? Or let's say you're in a contract and then something goes wrong with, let's say you're a week out before closing, because this has happened. And next thing you know, you get a call saying basically an AC leaks down in the master bedroom and ruins the floor. What do you do? These are things that, you can't just throw your hands up, because at the end of the day, it could be an issue. Now, the house was in the condition that it was in prior, like it was in good condition during the whole time of the inspection, but this happened after the inspection. It's a week before closing. I mean, all things happen. It's just what happens. But the question is what are you going to do? And this is where you got to be creative and to making sure you know how to negotiate a deal, right? Because if you're going in and especially, let me just say this, and Chad, you can back me up on this. I'm going to tell you something. A lot of people, and this is kind of going hand in hand with what we're kind of discussing. I don't know, again, Chad, I don't know if this happens in your market, but I have a lot of buyers out there that they want to go directly to the sales agent, right? The sales agent of the property. But what happens is that we're transaction brokers. So what happens on those sides of the deal, it just depends. We got so much loyalty that we have to uphold based on a listing agreement. and then we got so much loyalty that we have to hold to the buyer, right? So if you go into a transaction where you're just looking for the listing agent, it's not always the best option. And here's why, though. Here's the valid point of why. If you had your own separate agent and you brought your own agent to the table that was not part of the listing, then what that means is that now that agent is representing you in a full capacity and has nothing to do with the list. So the negotiation becomes more creative in your favor if it needs to be. And I'm sure the agent will do everything they can to represent you in the best possible way. But again, these are things that people need to consider, that it's not always about, and don't get me wrong, if you can go with the listing agent and everything goes smooth and you don't ever have a problem, that's fine. Like I'm for that. Like I'm always for going with, if I'm a listing agent or whatever, but sometimes also, just so everybody knows, it sometimes, and even though it's not always in our best interest as a listing agent, financially, it is a good idea to maybe bring a buyer agent to the table, in my opinion. And that's, you have this at all, Chad, like that kind of thing happening over there?
Yeah, occasionally.
Yeah. So, I mean, with that whole thing, I mean, I have it happen, I guess, more frequently, because I'm just sitting there thinking about it, and I'm like, man, I get it all the time. Like, I can't believe how many people, they don't really think about the difference between the two of the agents, right? But no, I mean, if you don't have it, that's a good thing. I mean, if you don't have it as much, I should say, that is a good thing. So that's awesome. So one thing I want to kind of lead into. So let's say, okay, you negotiated. Let's start from the beginning. You found your house, right? You looked on Zillow. You did all this wonderful stuff. You went to go negotiate the deal. You did the best deal in the world, right? And now it's time for closing. So now, guess what? My question to you is, because you didn't have an agent, what did you do about the fees for the title company? Let me tell you a little secret. I'm going to tell you a little secret on this. I'm going to try to keep it PG here, but what I will tell you is this, is when I bought my house, okay, I'm not going to mention no names, and I'm not going to mention anybody. By the way, if you're out there listening to anybody, title companies, lenders, whatever it is, we're looking for sponsors for the show. So you can always drop this if you want us to say your name out here. But anyways, I will tell you this, before I was an agent, I did buy a house without a realtor, right? So one of the things is, this is where I'm leading into, is that I get down to the table and they're like, I didn't negotiate any type of closing cost. So I get to the table and I'm like, there's $8,000 in closing costs to pay. 8,000 plus for closing costs on this particular deal. And I said, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting, okay, I got my down payment, I got everything else, it's ready to rock and roll. I did all my negotiating at the beginning. I got my inspection period. I got everything I wanted out of it. And then I get down to the table, and this is where you're at. So one of the things is that is negotiated sometimes is closing costs, right? And you don't know what the closing costs are, because you're not getting a fee sheet. You don't know what your lenders are. There's a lot of costs that go into this. So I would highly suggest, and again, Chad, I want to hear your side of this. I really want to hear this, because on my side, I'm going to tell you, there's so much information to really go with to understand what costs come with the closing of a property, whether it be a house or whether it be a land. Okay. And by the way, this is something I want to tell you too. So I know that I do this, and I'll tell everybody in the world that I do this, but I actually tell people up front that I have an administration fee cost on my land when I sell land and houses. And here's the reason why. You're going to add that cost into it, but I'm going to tell you something. That fee that you pay with me, that small fee that I'm going to charge somebody, I usually get that back in some kind of negotiation tactic from somewhere else that you would have probably paid, $600 more somewhere else. So you get that fee, and I do my best for you to get that fee back. Um, or you won't just get the, or it'll be a customer service fee, whatever it is. I'm just saying that, there's certain things that people need to realize of why there's fees involved, right? So with that being said, that's what I do in my market. Now, Chad, tell me a little bit about how that works with you as far as like closing costs. Do you get a chance to negotiate it? What is it that kind of plays in there? What are some of the fees?
So the fees just, you have the inspection fee, you have the appraisal fee that, that's all negotiable. Who pays for that? On our side over here in San Antonio, I mean, Southern Texas, Texas in general. And then you have the origination fee, right? So depending on the loan, the lender that you're going through, you have to consider that as well. And some are more pricier than others. And so I have a few lenders that I kind of go with that I know that they work well with my clients, but also depends on the scenario of my buyer as to where I take them to introduce them to that lender to make sure that they're getting the best bang for their buck, so to speak. And with that said, there's other fees involved. I'm not going to list all of them. There's as many expenses that come into buying a house. You got to pay attorney fees. You got to pay transaction fees.
Is it
But
is
not knowing, but talking about what the subject is, the topic here, not knowing what to look for in those fees when you are trying to purchase a house without a realtor, you're going to really kind of have to be well educated. Normally I work with investors as well on top of just traditional retail buyers, and one of the things that they always tell me is like, look, I'm going to close with my attorney just to save on closing costs, Chad. I don't even want to mess with the title company. But if that's something that you're well versed in and you've got a good real estate attorney that can close a transaction for you, then 100%. You don't even they can look up a title. They can look up a title and figure out whether or not you even need a title policy at the attorney's office, through the county records. But I don't recommend that. That's something that does happen, right? There's many different flavors to, to being that educated or not. And that's where, I come in, Tyler comes in your market. If you're not 100% sure, you're not sure where to start. That's what, we're here to educate you. We're here to help you and add that value, so.
Yeah, and again, that's if you choose. The whole thing is that I want to really put out there is that this whole thing's about dominating it yourself if you can, and the whole thing is just knowing what to look for, what to negotiate with, and having everything in your favor of leverage wise, and knowing what to leverage. These are always things to really go after and think about when it comes to these particular things. Now, I'm going to switch gears. We've been talking about the buyer. We took the buyer from finding a house, negotiating a deal, and all the way down to the fees and title fees of this whole transaction, if you will, right? So, by the way, if you haven't already, give us a thumbs up, a like, whatever it is. If you haven't already, put us a comment, all these things. Now's the time to do it. We really appreciate it. We hope that this content that we're going to bring, by the way, every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, that'll be 5:30 Central. So just by all means, we're going to be very consistent with this type of content. So just to touch a little bit, I'm going to go over just maybe one or two of these because I know that our time is kind of coming down to it. But one of the things is sellers, right? So now let's talk about sellers. You guys are out there trying to, when you want to sell your house, the first thing you think of is, I want the most that I can get, right? I want the top dollar of everything that I got because I paid for this house. Listen, let me tell you what, this is no joke. I don't even know how to tell this story with a straight face sometimes, but I'm going to try to tell it. So here's the thing. I know that there's some people that I come and I'll do a look at their house, right? So by the way, as an agent, listing agent, I have the option to take the listing or not, just as much as they have the right to use me or not, right? So there's I'm very choosy with what I deal with, right? So one thing is I do a comp on a house. I don't remember the price of the house, but I'm just going to call it 200. It's not even the correct. I'm just giving the number so we can do easy math when I go to tell you this. So this house is at 200 as a listing price, and I'm going to go take a look at it. And they were wood frames, that a guy did around some mirrors, right? And when I seen that it was a wood frame around some mirrors, that automatically in his mind put the house at 220. Now I'm gonna explain something to you. You put wood frame around a mirror, it doesn't lift you up $20,000. I mean, what'd you pay for the wood? Like that could, you know, I can't I can't even think about telling that story with a straight face.
It's gold. That's why, they put gold around the mirror. Oh my God, that's another.
Well, that's my whole thing. It's like I'm trying to understand where they got that, extra $20,000 put into it. But anyways, so my point behind what I'm trying to say is this, is that if you don't know what you're looking at, you're going to you're going to overprice your house and it's not going to sell as quick, right? So if you're not pricing it correctly, and listen, our CMA, and just for the record, and Chad, if it's different in your market, in San Antonio, let me know, but I'm going to state it for my market, is that the CMAs that we give you are approximate. They're not an appraisal, right? So because they're not an appraisal, it's an approximate, what we come up with based off of our research of what we have in front of us using our tools. And just so everybody's clear, our tools don't consist of Zillow, okay? Because if it did, we would be, we would, yeah, it just wouldn't make sense. So I'm just telling everybody that. I don't want to hear about what the Zestimate is, because here's why. And let me explain this. Is that if you go, now don't get me wrong, Zillow is a good for what I would call a litmus test on the scenario. But here's what you got to realize, is that sometimes the house that has 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 2-car garage, 1,200 square foot and 1,200 square foot, okay, that's maybe a half a mile away from each other. One could be abandoned and the other one could have been fixed up all inside, probably spent $30,000 on the right things, not just the wood around the mirror, right? So I'm talking about the right things. Maybe they put impact. Maybe they put the countertops. Maybe they, redid the whole thing with bamboo flooring or whatever it is, right? Whatever the top-notch stuff is. Maybe that's why that house down the road is different. But you're not going to always see that in Zillow, okay? Zillow is not always going to have that there for you to really see. And because they're going based off of the bedrooms, bathrooms, and square footage, and they don't know, they've never seen with their own 2 eyes, because Zillow is a company, right? They don't happen to go out there and be able to do that. So anyways, I'm just throwing that out there. If you guys are out there looking at Zillow, looking at estimates, I'm not saying that it's not a good litmus test, but you really got to consider what is good information and what is bad information. So that's what makes you diverse. And that's why, again, this is if you're doing it yourself, right? Because you got to figure out what tools you're going to probably have to pay for a tool to go get that done. All right. So these are things to really think about when you're talking about listing your property. And these are things that you need to really understand. So, Chad, does that sound about like what it is in your market?
Yeah, 100%. You gotta know exactly the relative, I call them contributory factors, right? So appraisers use what they call contributory factors when it comes to figuring out what the price of a home is on top of the market analysis. which is what a realtor does. A realtor provides you with current market analysis, comparative market analysis. That's what a CMA stands for. So you have to make sure the values that you are looking at as a professional real estate expert are relative to what that seller needs. And, you know, I've talked to, you know, for sale by owners before. They're very aggressive, very, you know, they are smart when it comes to, you know, what their home is worth. They know the value of what they invested into their home. They've done their due diligence, in some cases more than the realtor ever will. But then there's the other side of the coin where some FSBOs or for sale by owners, they'll just overprice or underprice their home, and they don't even have, you know, honestly a clue. They think that, well, Zillow said that this house up the street just sold for, you know, 175, so that means my home's worth 175. No, it doesn't, John Doe. It sure does not. Let me tell you something, buddy. Let me tell you something. And so that's where, you know, we come in and, you know, we get excited to help people, you know, get the right price on their home, because then we know it's going to sell.
Exactly. And that's kind of what that's what I'm trying to really put out there, you know, like, I don't care that people, this is the whole reason why I wanted to do this whole segment, this episode, if you will, on the podcast, because I want people to know, hey, listen, you can go do it yourself. You can dominate it, but just make sure you're dominating with knowing what you're getting into, which leads me into one of the other factors here. I'm going to try to get through. I know our time is starting to get limited, but I just want to really go into two more things that I figure that's important. So understanding what you were agreeing to, that's kind of a big factor. I will say this. We are part of, Chad, I'm assuming you're part of the National Realtors Board, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're both part of the National Realtor Board. So we're held to a higher standard of basically doing ethics and making sure that everything's on the up and up, no matter which, no matter what the transaction is, right? So with that kind of being said, is that goes back to when we're negotiating, going back to what you're signing. Our contracts are made with attorneys and several attorneys that are, that create these contracts, and I'm assuming you guys have that same, it's a standard contract for certain pieces, and you guys have the attorneys who created these for you, correct?
That's correct. Yep, we sure do.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're the same way in regards to that. So my point behind that is that these are already been tried and proven, if you want to call it that, meaning that when a dispute erupts of whatever it is, these things are tried and proven, right? So it's a very valid point to understand that when you're signing something and you're just signing away, you need to read what you're signing. I mean, I don't care who sends it to you in e-signature and they say, I need that back quickly. You need to read what you're signing. I know that I go and I will read exactly what I'm signing. I've had customers where I'll send them an e-signature and they're like, no, I don't want to do e-signature. I want you to send me the PDF. I'll print it off and I'll take my time to read it. They do, and then they send it back to me, which is fine. I have no problem with that. Now, I will tell you that, if you haven't bought a house, you haven't done certain things, you may want to have, because here again, this is not using one of our standard contracts, right? So when you're doing this yourself and you're dominating real estate without an agent, right? Because that's what this segment's about. What contract are you using is what my question is. Did you Google something and type in real estate contract? Did you go and do a Zoom with the legals over there? I mean, I don't know. All I know is that if I have something in play and you got a contract and you agree to something and you didn't understand the verbiage, you didn't understand what that meant, and you just wrote it up because that's what you thought was there. No realtor is going to be able to, after you sign a contract by yourself with somebody else, no other realtor is going to be able to come and save you. It's just, It's just not going to happen, So with that being said, know what you're signing. I mean, Chad, have you ever ran into something where, well, I'll tell you this, I know, and I'm gonna let Chad speak on this, but I know that I've ran into a situation, and not very many people is going to know this unless you're sitting here listening, but there's assignability factors, right? Assignability option factors out there. And those can get really tricky really quick, because if you don't know what you're signing, if you're the seller, your property could be tied up until the end of time, because you don't know what you're signing, and somebody else has the legal right to your property because you didn't read the fine print, or you didn't understand something, and you didn't have nobody to ask. So these are things. But Chad, what have you experienced, or have you experienced anything that people just kind of felt like they didn't know what they were signing? Have you ever had a customer ask you that?
Yeah, I have a couple times. As far as there's two different sides of that coin in my book, because the investors like to use their own contracts as far as buying, and then the
Now, wait a minute, Chad. I don't mean to interrupt you, but you said something that I want to hit home with these people. You just said that investors like to use their contract, right? Now, why do you think an investor wants to use their contract?
because they always try to segue in an advantage that benefits them,
That's
and
right.
yeah. And so I don't know if you've had to deal with that, but that's one thing where I would recommend, or I suggest, if I get a call or somebody asks me a question, I say, well, whose contract you using? They say, well, I have one. I have a boiler template that I use for my attorney. Well, that's great. Your attorney can draft up contracts as well, but I like to use the 1 to 4 family residential contract that's vetted by the Texas Real Estate Commission, and that protects both the buyer and the seller, and equally. And there are touch points within there. There are variables in there that you can negotiate X, Y, Z. So
Yeah,
that's
no, yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I'm at a point to where I just think to myself, and I'm looking at this and understanding what is the possibilities of, when you're not using the contract, of the possibilities what could go wrong. So those are things that I would tell you, as a seller, if you got somebody saying, hey, they're raising their hand, hey, I got this contract, I'll do that. Oh, and another thing as a seller, and I'm gonna try to move to the next thing, is that if you're in let's just say you have a list pending, or you got some kind of pre-foreclosure going on, or whatever that is, just remember this: when you get these people calling you and they're saying, we'll buy your house for cash or something like that, these are those people that make the contract that fits their need. Okay. So it's important that, and also you're going to get less for your house going that way, you know. So you can get more for your house, pay a realtor their fee, whatever that fee is. There's not a standard cost, by the way, if you guys sellers out there. A matter of fact, I do mine in packages, so you guys have options. But either way, there's not a standard fee that anybody has to pay for something. But either way, my whole dilemma, my whole point is that don't go down that route. And then let me just finalize the last subject here with: protect yourself at all costs as a seller by disclose. And if I could say the word disclose enough times, make sure that I could say disclose, disclose, disclose. What do I mean by that? If there's mold in your house and you paint over it to make it look pretty and nobody else sees it, that could be a problem. So make sure that you disclose anything and everything, to include structural problems, to include roof, whatever, major things, little things, doesn't matter. Make sure that there is a disclosure form. And if you don't have that, again, these are things you have to have in your arsenal if you're going to dominate real estate without a real estate agent. That's one of the benefits. Our paperwork is probably a good thickness like this, and that's all because of liability reasons. And by the way, the state hires us for liability purposes because we have to have this stack of paperwork and we have to make sure things go the way it goes. So, Chad, I mean, would you agree with that?
100%.
Yeah. So, I mean, I want to wrap it up by just saying, Disclose, disclose, disclose. If you do nothing else, you do not want something to happen 10, 15 years, 5 years, 3 years down the road, and then bam, you got a problem because nothing was disclosed. So I hope that with this, I'm going to kind of dismount from this conversation and kind of call it a podcast at this point. I think that we covered a lot of really good options. So just remember, guys, if you haven't already, hit the like button, click the bell, wherever you're at, whatever platform you're watching on. I want you to tune in next week at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, next Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, and that's 5:30 Central. We'll be here ready to take your questions. So if at all costs, I thank you guys very much. Chad, did you have anything?
No, this is great. Yeah, reach out to us if you have any questions. We're happy to help you.
All right, awesome. With that being said, over and out, and we'll talk to you next week. Well, thank you for watching and listening to the Big Green Real Estate Talk. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.